Welcome to MetaPod, the podcast where we discuss operational execs and organizations that make and move stuff, and our common headaches, digital transformation, the forever labor shortage, and doing more with less. And now, the host of MetaPod, Ron Crabtree.
Hello, it's Ron Crabtree, back with another episode of MetaPod, where we really focus on the three common challenges that organizations face, particularly in tangible goods. North America has been the focus of digital transformation, digitization of work, the forever labor shortage, the fact that that's not going to get better, it's only going to get worse in years to come, and then just needing to do more with less of everything, resources, facilities, logistics, waste, or whatever it may be. And in this episode, we're going to talk a little bit with Ernesto Gonzalez, and I hope I pronounced that correctly.
Ernesto Gomez.
Ernesto Gomez, my bad. And Ernesto has got some interesting perspectives around how do we get more out of the people that we have. So kind of our topic here is empowerment as a means of unlocking organizational potential and improve performance and support growth in the face of these sorts of challenges. So if your organization may be stalling or anticipate the need for rapid acceleration or growth or adaptation, or think you need to get more out of your teams and the people you have, you'll find this episode pretty helpful with how we can unlock the higher performance potential of the people who work for us today. So with that, Ernesto, tell us a bit about you.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you. I'm very happy to be here with you today. Well, I've been around for a while. I've started as an entrepreneur myself with, more than 10 businesses. And then for reasons that I still don't understand, I was invited to join a corporation where I reached senior positions. I was CHRO for a company that had 83,000 employees in 31 countries. So you can imagine how I've been, seeing how organizations perform first at the micro level and then at the large level. And throughout my history, I've been intrigued by, what drives performance, how really teams can achieve more than they think they can. And I define myself as a helper of organizations and individuals to grow and achieve their goals. And more often than not, what you see are barriers that you have to solve and just play with the strengths of your teams. But in my case, I've been in the corporate world and also as an entrepreneur. And after 22 years of doing this at a corporate level, I decided that I wanted to provide a framework. So I wrote a book, and whose name is Regrowth.
The book is called Regrowth?
Regrowth, correct.
Where do we find this book?
You can find it at Amazon, online, also online with Barnes & Noble. And what I provide there, it's, of course, is my experience throughout my journey, but mainly is, given that all companies have the mandate to grow, and this is inescapable, what you can do about that, and what you can do about solving the soft wiring of the company so that you can take advantage of the opportunities out there. So that's pretty much in a nutshell what I've been doing for the past, 30 to 40 years.
All right, awesome. Well, I'm glad you could join us. And it's always interesting to have, a published book author talk about their secret sauce and a little bit about the framework, and we can come back to that here in a bit. But let's get into a diagnostic here, Ernesto. I'm looking for, what are three key areas when it comes to, making a dent in this challenge of doing more with less and getting more out of the existing workforce? What are the three key areas you want to diagnose? I think that's something around untapping potential, change readiness of the organization, and then finally, the cultural barriers, understanding those. I think those are perhaps the three themes. Could you kind of tackle those one at a time and help us wrap our head around what should we be looking at? Why are we looking at this? How do we measure and determine the nature of the gap or the opportunity in each of these areas?
If I were, which I can't, ask our audience to raise, their hands, and if I ask them, well, do you think that you have what it takes to lead with, under this environment, challenging environment, rapid change, uncertainty, for the last 5 years, where we have seen in the world is it's very challenging, right? From a pandemic, weather problems, geopolitical problems. Today we see all these things with tariffs and stuff. If I were to ask, are you concerned about this? I would probably say that 80 to 90% are going to say yes. And what I've also found, because I kind of checked this with ChatGPT, I say, well, do you think that things are going to get worse, better, or stay the same in the next 5 years? And what I got from ChatGPT is that if I were to ask this question to leaders, they would say 80 to 90%, they would say it's going to get worse. So that's kind of the scenario where we have to play these days, right? And one of the things that we have to do is, how can I deal with this with my existing organization? Because I don't have unlimited resources. I cannot change the whole team. I do have to do more with less, as you were saying, because that's what I'm supposed to do, and still I need to grow. So that's kind of the playing ground where I see the situation playing, and this is where I kind of introduce the idea of you have to unlock the potential, because that's what you have, right? You would be surprised that the general perspective is that our teams are performing at 60%, 50 to 60% of what they could really achieve. Even in situations today where everybody's swamped with work, we have everybody's spraying out thin. We have a lot of priorities piling. I mean, it's just organizations are overextended, but still there is the opportunity to tap into the potential that they already have and find the opportunity to grow. So for me, the first challenge that you were mentioning, this, how can we unlock potential in our existing resources, should be in the agenda of any leader. And what I'm about to say, it's I don't have scientific proof. I would love to have a business case to value what unlocking potential could mean for a company. But I would give you a hint. The largest hidden cost in organizations today is unrealized potential. That's by far. It's estimated to be around 20 to 40% of the cost of your payroll.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's huge. So just
Let me ask, can I ask a question here? When you talk about untapped potential, I'd like to explore this a little bit. One of the programs I developed years ago is a Stop the Crazy Waste workshop program. And I make this audacious assertion at the beginning that 30% or more of all the time spent in an organization is probably being wasted, just flat wasted. And then I kind of take the audience through, this value add, non-value add thinking, and how do you actually look at your processes and be really critical around what we spend our time doing. So that's one approach, right? But I think what you're talking about here goes beyond that.
Yep.
And is a little different. You're really talking about the human potential, not just waste elimination. You're taking a different approach to this, right?
That is correct. And I see it in two levels: at the individual level, and then at the organizational level, because you have to work on both to really unlock. So I was saying that the cost is huge, 20 to 40%. And then you can see it also from the lost revenue perspective. And if you were able to use all this ingenuity and resourcefulness and ideas that your people can provide, you could probably add to your top line maybe 10 to 20%. So all combined is huge, the potential, the transformation for organizations. And I was saying that it plays both at the individual and the organizational level. First of all, think about how we have been unlocking potential for the last 10 to 20 years, just because it was customary to do it this way. You put a lot of pressure on your teams. You request them to do more. You challenge them all the time. You are never satisfied. You create a lot of stress, and people give a little bit more of what they can produce under that circumstance. And that can work for a while, especially in a crisis. but it's not sustainable in the long run. First of all, because it's leader dependent. The person who is, calling the shots and putting the pressure has to do it in a way that it's not really a big threat. But at the same time, if you operate under that model for a long period of time, you create resentment. And that's why, I don't know if you have heard about this statistic from Gallup. They say that 80% of people are disengaged in the corporations today, and just 20% are engaged. And I think it has to do with that model. I call it the push model for unlocking potential, where you just push, 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 push. And I think that we have to change that perspective or that approach into a pull model, where you really have to get closer to your team and kind of, explore, probe, what is really behind the person, what kind of, qualities this person have, what kind of aspirations I can tap on, and kind of play the game on, I'm gonna help you grow, and I'm gonna help you achieve more, and in doing that, you're gonna help me, perform and achieve my goals as well. Because I've seen that people have a very strong developmental drive, which guides, how they operate. Think about sports teams. I can start, giving you all kinds of examples where the same team that has been having a coach with a certain style, kind of, hits a wall. All of a sudden, a new coach comes, and then, they start performing a lot better. And it's the same people. In my experience, for instance, when I was hired by this company to run a business, I started in the business side. By the way, I never thought I would be talking about HR in my life, because I used to operate businesses. So I was given this challenge. I was a consultant for a large CPG company in Mexico, and they had a unit where the goals were not been met. And they say, well, we're going to hire you, but it's going to be, we're going to compensate you with earnout. So you have to double the revenue, the sales of this particular unit in 6 months. If you do that, you earn your prize, and if you don't, you don't. So I was hired on that, and I sort of talked to the team, and I saw that they had a lot of talent, and I accepted the challenge. And lo and behold, we doubled sales in 6 months. And that's where I learned that, if you start by talking to your people first, so tell me what you see. You're closer to the customers. Tell me what you think, and start playing on their strengths. All of a sudden, this virtuous circle comes alive. And
Yeah, so I got to ask a question here. Something I think would help the audience is if you have a story you could tell here where you were looking at this untapped potential. Maybe you can give us a very specific example without disclosing anything you shouldn't of a situation with, a very specific customer service department, manufacturing, whatever. But help us understand, how do I measure this? How do I put a handle on saying, hey, there's 10%, there's 30, there's 50, help me understand how you actually evaluate the gap of potential.
well, thank you for asking that question, because it's a really difficult question to ask. But I started off first, talking to CEOs and C-suite teams, and I would ask them this question just out of the blue. Say, listen, you handpick your team, right? You know them very well. You know what they're capable of. You have probably nurtured them and groomed them to be where they are right now. So what do you think they are achieving? Where do they stand, actual performance versus future performance or potential? Where do you think they stand? And the answer that I got the most is 50%. And I would say, wait, 50%? Yeah, I think that they could do a lot more. I know them very well, and I know they can play with the ball, and they can do it better. The following question was, well, why do you think they are not achieving their whole potential? And most of the CEOs that I've talked to would say, well, we have a lot of bureaucracy in this company. Sometimes, we're slow. There is a lot of hierarchies, sometimes we are not really open to hear new opinions that much. We're slow to react. We are, large company, and sometimes all these procedures and systems and things to kind of mitigate risk play against us. And of course, the follow-up question, well, but but you designed that. You can fix it, right? I mean, you're the boss. You're supposed to be the one who solves all these problems. So what haven't you? And all in all, I haven't got a really good answer. And I think it comes with a perspective that we all have in saying, you know what, I cannot get closer to my teams because I'm not supposed to, transgress this line where I'm the boss and they're the employee. And I cannot really kind of probe a little bit more on what they are, what they could do or hear ideas. Sometimes ego gets in the way more often than not because you are the highest paid person in the room and you say, you know what, I'm supposed to have all the answers. So I cannot really, just let them, do whatever they want. So all these things, play a part. But I I would ask, your audience, I would ask, ask this your question. You can ask this even for yourself. You know, am I achieving my high potential? And what's stopping me from doing that? And you will find that if you ask yourself that question, more likely than not, you were going to say, I have a lot of skill to give and I could do a lot better. Only if I could do this, and that. So just fix the problem, right? So I don't know if there is a educated way to measure that, but I think that everybody has this hunch that we could do better, and we have the team to do better. Now, this means again that you have to cut against the grain, and sometimes play a different role with your team, not really as the know-it-all, but as a person who is willing to hear, and start with that. I've done that with my teams. Say, well, instead of use this or that consultant, how would you fix this problem? What would you do if you were in my position? You know,
Right.
what are your ideas? And start from there. Start, slowly and gradually, and you will be surprised how much you can advance.
Well, I think that gets us into a natural pivot then, the change request, the change readiness individually as an organization. How do we assess that? I mean, that's the next thing you had here in the notes that makes sense now. Like, so, okay, we recognize, at least in our guts, that there is a significant gap in opportunity, but now we need, what about the readiness to actually do something about that? What would you assess or look at and examine for the readiness side of it?
I love an Edward Deming quote, the total quality guru, who says that a bad system will beat a good person every time.
Say that again?
A bad system will beat a good person every time. Yeah, and it is true. As much as you need to work with, how can I help people upscale and develop, a better performance, you need to see the system. Because as you were saying, all these endless meetings, this is what I was saying about, the organizational part, the wiring, all these, processes that we have in place, incentives, are there for a reason, but may not be really suitable for the future. And I always strongly recommend for organizations to audit them every 1 or 2 or 3 years, and say, all the systems that we have in place, do they work? Are they really helping us achieve something or not? And be humble about getting rid of what doesn't work. The system that I see, you have to approach it in what I think is in 3 dimensions.
Okay.
First, the change readiness has to do with talent. So you really have to make sure that you have a good talent density in your organization, which means in the key positions, in the mission critical positions of my company, do I have, outstanding talent that's going to help me, achieve my goals or not? And if you don't, you have to make sure that you find a way to have it. It doesn't mean that you have to have outstanding talent in each and every position of the company because, I mean, it's desirable, but it's impossible, quite frankly. Uh,
Right.
but at least in the key positions, you have to make sure that you have the right talent. Not only because they're going to perform better, because talented people, A players, set standards of achievement, of performance, and the expected performance raises. And people understand that to play that game with these talented people, you have to do a lot better than that. So talent is very important for 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 questioning, where we're at and where we should go, which is part of the
Right.
change process.
So basically, at this stage, we're assessing, do we have the talent? How to fix the problem if we don't? It's a different conversation. But right now, you're advocating, a key component is, do you in fact have adequate talent in those key spots, in the leadership of the functional groups at a minimum, that have the ability?
Correct, but because if you don't, I mean, you cannot, out talent, a bad system, but you have to have talent.
Right.
Otherwise, you will not have, how to provide and deliver on your promises to your, customers outside and inside the organization. So talent is really, really important. The second piece is culture, as we were saying, and in culture, there are two aspects that are important: is what you stand for, what you really want to achieve, and be specific about that. And of course, what I call the contextual effect. What we were saying. Do I have the right processes? Do I have the right incentives? Because if you want to innovate and you're risk averse, that's not going to work, right? If you really have an incentive system and you give bonuses for performance only to those who do not make mistakes, all of a sudden you're kind of tilting the system into a way of performing, which is not exactly what you want. So you have to harmonize those two. What I stand for, the principles, values, or whatever you want to express that, and the purpose of the company with the reality. What is the routines, the systems, the procedures that we have in place, and believe me, it takes a lot of guts to go, and question those things because they're there and they become sacred cows, and that's how we perform. So change readiness has to do with those things, and then the third component that I call, the collective mindset. It's you have to go a little bit, deeper than that, and start understanding what are the beliefs here that I have to challenge, and getting to that level into, are we gonna believe this forever, or we can probably be open and humble enough, and don't have these stuck switches where everything is, we have been doing this for many years, and this is the other way to do it. Uh, Again, those things for me are important in, talent density, culture, and the collective mindset, and you have to, work on those things specifically to move the needle and to make the organization, help the organization change.
Yeah, so you're making me think about something here. Have you ever read or been exposed to? There was a Harvard Business Review article that came out years ago. I don't remember exactly when. And it's around the premise of it is the tools of cooperation and change. And they had a heat map graphic. You may have seen this, and I can send it to you if you don't have it. Well, what's occurring for me as I'm listening is, you got this on the left side of it, if you will, going up is the degree of agreement in the organization about what to change and why to change, do anything different, right? How much agreement to have about what to do. And then they've got an arrow in this, heat map graphic going the other way, how to change, right? So if we have low agreement on what to change and how to change it, the tools we use to get the change are different than they would be or should be, would be different than they should be if we're like, for example, we have high agreement about what to do, but we're fighting about how to do it. There's different tools and methods you use to solve the problem. Is that part of the diagnostic in your head here when you're talking about diagnosing this culture? Are you going down that path at all?
It is funny that you mentioned that. I was not aware of that article, But in my book, I present a similar 2 by
Okay.
2, where I would say, consensus, the agreement on where to go, and capabilities, current capabilities, and the future capabilities that you need to have. And you have to move from your known knowns into your known unknowns first, right? Because and that's really helped, has a little bit of a challenge, because where you play today is comfortable. I mean, you know how to do it, and there's agreement on that. There's consensus, and you have the capabilities to do that. Problem is when you foresee that you have to go, further ahead, and you could probably have consensus of where you want to go, but you don't have the capabilities yet, and that requires for you to map, where you want to go there. That is the strategy, and what kind of knowledge do you need to go there, and what kind of mental systems and beliefs and mentality you have to need to go there. Because if I were to describe, let's say that you're a company today who is, in the CPG industry that I know, and you understand that you have to move really fast into, you know, different products for sustainable world, and you don't have the capabilities to do that, you need to abandon a lot of your current beliefs to move there. So in assessing how much do you have to play beyond your core and where do you want to go, you have to start kind of describing what kind of company you need to become in order to do that. And then reverse that, reverse engineer that into, what kind of culture I need, what kind of people I need, and so that I can go there. And I think that it's pivotal. And thank you for bringing that up for change. You need to know where you want to go, and what kind of a stretch that is. And there is nothing wrong with staying in your no knowns for a while. The continuous improvement, it's really a good way to produce good results.
Right.
But the jackpot is in doing things that you're not doing today. That's where you can bring most of the value.
Okay, cool. Well, it feels like we can transition then from the diagnostic side because you kind of helped us think about these three key areas, the untapped potential, the change readiness of the organization, and then understanding the barriers culturally to getting it done, which, and to summarize that is how much a barrier is, do we even agree on what to do and where we're going, and do we agree on how we're going to get there? And if we don't, then that's fundamentally, something we have to fix. So it's just gauging that. And it's a practical matter. The answer to that probably depends on what it is we're talking about. If we're talking about, growth that everybody shares in, we're probably going to agree it's a good idea. We may not agree on how to do it. We're talking about cost reduction. Everybody's going to be in a fear mode because we have to cut jobs, right? So it kind of depends on the topic, but I get all that. It makes a lot of sense. So let's pretend, the audience is saying, yep, yes, in fact, we've got opportunities here. Ernesto, share with us kind of your secret sauce here, maybe out of your playbook and your book. What do tactically? I mean, strategically, you describe it. Where are we going to go? Why are we going there? Getting clear about that. That's kind of obvious. If we don't have that, we got to start there. But what would be your advice to go do to at least tap into half of this potential that's out there?
First, you have to recognize that the very basic unit of analysis in a company, in an organizations, are teams. So you have to think in terms of teams, not individuals, which it may be counterintuitive because we've been talking about individuals. But really, what you have to improve is the team performance. And I'm going to refer to a Google, research that came about, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, where these guys are really systematic about analyzing, how to perform. And they began with these questions. What makes a good team? And how can I kind of decompose, the ingredients of a good team so that we can replicate that, all the time. They call it the Project Aristotle. And they really soon, they experimented that they say, well, what if we have seniors and juniors, right? So you have, the wisdom of the guys who know very much, and then the young people who have this stamina, and they proved that, and it didn't really perform well. And they say, well, why don't we have diversity, right? So different specialties and people who come from different, disciplines. And it just didn't really cut or made the results up until they found that what distinguishes the great teams is the ability for people to speak up, to contribute ideas, to present ideas, and to be heard. And they call that psychological safety. So
Psychological safety. Okay.
psychological safety, correct. Where they say the intelligence of the team increases in direct proportion to the ability of everybody to say what they think and to contribute, to feel included, to be able to speak up, and to be able to question the status quo. So for me, you were saying about the barriers. I present in my book at least four components or four conditions for this, unlocking potential to take place at the team level. First, you have psychological safety, which is what I was describing. Second thing, you have to have a sense of ownership. Are people really owning and committing and doing what they said they're going to do? Very simple. Just imagine what kind of a world we would have if you do what you say and you do what you commit to. Third, it's the genuine willingness to help others grow in the team. So if you're part of a team, I mean, you have to make sure that your teammates are growing and they're performing at their best, because otherwise you're going to be isolated and you're going to live in an island, and you could do probably well, but the team is not going to do well. So genuinely, to what extent am I willing to help other grow? And fourth and last, it's to transition this journey from ego versus truth. At a team level, you have to have egos checked, because the idea is not who gets the credit for the idea. It's not important who is right. The thing here is we have to get it right. So you have to switch that. It's not important to be right. What is important is to get it right. And when you abandon that idea that you have to be right all the time, all of a sudden teams, you just imagine a team where there is ownership, everybody wants to help each other, you're shooting for the truth, not ego, and then everybody can contribute and speak up. The dynamic of the team really changes quite a bit, and ideas flow, and you're gonna make better decisions, which is the name of the game. You have to, if you make better decisions at a team level, you're gonna improve. So that's the secret sauce that I propose in my book, and there might be some other elements, but at the beginning, I would say this is a good place to start.
Yeah, that agrees with a lot of my experiences over the years, and helping organizations go through operational excellence transformations of various kinds. Teams large and small. And that agrees a lot with some of my experiences. I like how you kind of put this together in the four chunks, right? The four different components. I find that pretty interesting and helpful, because I've always kind of tackled those one at a time, and then over time try to get all of those to happen. I never thought about it quite that way. So that's helpful. Thank you.
And you know what? What I think is the leader today in teams, even if you think about the word leader, it's kind of the visionary, the person who attracts all the spotlights, the person who has foresight. And it is true that you need somebody, playing that role, but leader has to also be a steward. So I play with this idea of leader stewardship, where what you're trying to do is to make the team better. And your success will depend on how better your team gets. I tell, junior people approach me, or used to approach me a lot in the organization, asking me, what is that I need to do to be the next vice president or grow, etc. And I said, the first thing you have to understand is that you will not be escalating positions in the company. The way to go up in the company is because you are pushed by your team to rise. It's not that you step over people to get what you want. Is that if you ignite your team, the team is going to push you, and all of a sudden you're going to be in a much better place. And that's that mentality of how can I really upgrade, upskill, develop the team, and not how can I use the team to my benefit. It's a different model, but I think it's important, and it plays very well with how can I untap the potential of these people, and how can I get closer? I understand where they're coming, what their aspirations are, and that is counterintuitive with the command and control culture that we've been having for many, many years.
Yeah, so,
But
so I'd like to ask a question here, Ernesto, because, I'm grappling this because I'm working on projects like this with customers as we speak. These are billion-dollar size companies that perform pretty well. They actually perform quite well, but, they recognize they got to get better at, culture and, if they want any real change or improvement in the future, they've got to change some of the culture. And my experience has been, I wonder if this has been your experience, is that basically if you're going to be skilling up a leadership team to think about these four things critically, right? Because these are really important, but you've got to skill up these managers. Talk about those key leaders in the organization. So how do you do that? And I have a hypothesis that the best way to do that is to pick something that we need to go do. In other words, here's a specific initiative that we need to tackle, right? And then teach them how to put those skills into play around a very specific, tangible outcome. You talked about the criticality of where are we going to go? Where are we going? Right? Why are we going there? But then maybe decomposing that a little bit to, specific, tangible outcome projects. Have you used that as a technique to help skill up the leadership team?
yes, yes. Let me start by saying that as much as we think that probably you have heard this phrase attributed to Peter Drucker, which, by the way, there is no evidence that he ever said this. Culture is strategy for breakfast.
Right.
Like the Drucker Institute research everything Drucker, wrote, all his speeches, and they didn't find it. They didn't find that.
That's interesting.
Well, I don't know why they attribute this to Peter Drucker, but anyway, I don't think that if you have really, really, really bad strategy, there is no culture that can, turn it around. So if you really don't have a good, an idea of how you're gonna, win in the market, you cannot really start by having a good company. So culture complements that. So it is very important, as you were saying, that you have a clear understanding of how you want to produce value. Where you're going to play, how you're going to win, what capabilities you need. And then based on that, you start working on your talent dimension, what kind of people I need, what kind of skills they have. I describe this using a framework produced by a Chicago Boot professor, Harry Davis, who says, performance talent-wise, it's responds to three things: conceptual knowledge, domain knowledge, and action skills. I love his framework, and I really think that you have to start. You say, do I have the knowledge, conceptual knowledge in my talent team to do what they like? Do they know the industry? The domain knowledge, and can they make this happen? So you have to start there, to pursue the strategy, and then what kind of culture I need. But you have to understand that for change readiness, your culture cannot be too tight. You have to leave some bandwidth, because more likely than not, things are going to change. And all of a sudden, you have a straitjacket in terms of your culture for a specific strategy that is going to change in a few years. Now you have to do all over again. So you have to play with a certain bandwidth. And I say that you have to inoculate the change readiness into the teams to perform better.
Okay, cool.
But yes, you have to know where you want to go.
All right. So that's pretty cool. Anything else you would share as far as the go-dos, right? Things you should go do to close these gaps we've been talking about. What else should we go do, if anything?
I really think that there are some conditions in leadership. First of all, we have to understand that as good as practices are, we start the next practice and it's going to give you, value in your company. As good as they can be, they rarely are transformative. They help you achieve, better results. So the first thing you have to understand is that you have to work on your people, because everything in a company is a people problem at the end. If you're not innovating enough, if you're not producing enough, everything is a people problem in the end. And one of the things that is kind of counterintuitive, but I asked people to nurture this idea of leaders looking under the hood, meaning, you really start kind of questioning where I'm coming from, where are my beliefs? Am I really committed to this or not? Am I invested in something that is producing results, yes or no? And be able to question that. And the second thing, it's the ability to take perspective. We live in a very task-oriented, environment, and you're, in your micro world in the task all the time. But you have to step up, and you have to step, back a little bit and say, what is the system? Where is this going? And do I have to pivot or not? So this ability to, go from micro to macro is something that I encourage, leaders to do. And the third thing is that if you're gonna look at your mental models and your beliefs and question them, you're gonna take a step back. You have to take action.
Right.
Because you don't take action, nothing is gonna happen. But you have to be prepared to reflect on your action real quick. Is the action, producing the results I want, yes or no? And that is an input for your thinking. So this idea, and I present this in the mindset part of my book, of what kind of belief system I have, what kind of perspective I take, and how I take action, I think it's very important.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And I think that I think you're in agreement then with something, my hypothesis early on, that we have to, it's a learned skill by putting it into practice. So this isn't the skill set that you just talk about and magically somehow it happens, or they read a book and magically somehow, it changes. It's a highly experiential adventure, right? That I found, and it sounds like you would agree, that you got to pick very specific things to go do and then consciously think about, do we have the ownership? How are we supporting each other's growth? Are we focused on the ego or the truth of the matter? And then have we created psychological safety in this? They're not serial. They're kind of have to all moosh together, you know, uh, in the process is being really important. And it sounds like you would agree that the best way to do that is go change something, go make something happen. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I really think that, I encourage to work on the system, because as I mentioned to you, the Deming quote about, a bad system will beat a good person every time. But at the same time, you don't have to wait until you change the whole thing, because you're
Right.
going to wait forever. So jump into the first opportunity, work with your team, start, addressing these things, and that's going to be contagious. And at the same time, of course, try to see that how the whole thing is, the whole thing suitable or not in the company to achieve my goals. And this is kind of a different perspective, because in business, we have been taught about, you have to create value, you have to create value quick, revenues, growth, market share, whatever. Uh, and we are not really trained to deal with the people side of the business. This is something that we kind of learn as we go. And I came up with this framework after hitting the wall many, many, many times. And I experimented with this. And for instance, in the last company that I worked for, I was in charge of scaling up the culture for a 45,000 people company. So we scaled know these principles, where some of them are similar, but the values that the company had. And it is a journey where you have to be willing to, you have to be patient. At the same time, you have to produce results, but the sooner you can start, the better. Just because it's gonna take time to readjust. A company has been the way it is for many, many years, and you have to start, right away, small, but understanding that it's gonna take a while to really hit that, tipping point. But once you do, believe me, this is magical.
Yep. I've experienced that a number of times in my career, and so that's pretty interesting. So this has been really good, Ernesto. You've given us a lot to think about here. And any final, just final summary bit of advice for the audience before we get into wrap up?
Uh, you know, I really like this book about Malcolm. What is his name? That what brought you here won't get us there, right?
Right.
I really think that this is one of the things that all leaders have to understand. In today's world, we started by saying this is gonna get worse. We have to do more with less.
Right.
You have to empower your teams to do better, and you have to be willing to cross the line into the human part of the company more than you were willing to do that before. And that's uncomfortable because we're not really trained in doing this, but this is the only way to unlock potential down the road.
Right.
Think about this with AI. If you're a reasonably well managed company, company A incorporates AI, and then company B incorporates AI as well. Both have access to the same tools and problems. Pretty soon, that's going to be neutralized because they both will know what to do. Many years ago, that was the advantage. Today is not going to be the advantage. So if that's not the advantage, what will lead us to win? It's going to be the people side of the business because that's the thing that you have to really, energize to create value. So I would like to live this. As much as we are advancing in knowing what to do, we have to advance in, the wisdom, the judgment, the foresight, the ideas of how we're going to make this organization get an edge in the market. And that's people specific. So we have to bet, we need to get better at that. And at least present that as an issue, as part of the agenda of the CEO, the C-suite, and the leaders of a company.
Yeah. Yeah. For a long time, I've said that, all things being equal, your competitors have access to everything you do. And then I've always had this assertion, which it sounds like you would agree with, that ultimately at the end of the day, it's the differentiator is how well we've engaged our people and made them part of and owners of and brand advocates, et cetera, et cetera. So that's, kind of the ultimate differentiator at the end of the day is the degree to which we've engaged our people and made them part of that future state that we're shooting for. So Ernesto, this has been great. Thank you for joining me.
No, Ron, it's been my pleasure. Thank you for having me. I love talking about these things. If people want to get to know me better, I encourage them to go to my LinkedIn page. It's Ernesto Gomez Arzapalo, Arzapalo. They can get in touch with it there. I have also a website, which is called aspenmindset1.com.
Okay.
They can contact me there. And if they want to buy my book and kind of, understand this strategic path better, they go to Amazon and you can put Ernesto Gomez books and it's going to come, Regrowth, and happy to help in any way I can.
Awesome. Thank you. So thank you for joining us for this podcast. And I'd really appreciate it if, you'd like this, follow it, refer it, repost, and share those out to others in your network so that we can continue to bring great people like Ernesto to the show and share some of that secret sauce for success. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for joining MetaPod. For requests on topics or to ask questions, you can connect with Ron Crabtree 3 ways: via email at metapod@metaexperts.com, via LinkedIn, or by calling him directly at 734-425-1455, extension 103. Lastly, if you love the show, please consider leaving a 5-star review on your favorite podcast app. We truly appreciate all your support.